Art Energy's Premium Blend series presents exclusive interviews about the oil and gas sector with the industry's best managers and analysts.
When we first started drilling horizontal wells, you saw most operators out here drilling 1 mile laterals, 5,000 foot laterals, and then we figured out that a 1.5 mile lateral was more economic, and now we're routinely drilling 2 mile laterals here in the Midland Basin. So, the longer lateral lengths was the one part of the evolution, and then trying to figure out the optimum size on the frac job. How much sand, how much fluid, how close together to put the perfs, the size of the stages. And so we've tried different combinations of those things, and I think different operators have slightly different opinions on that, and it may vary from place to place in the basin, as far as what works better. But in general, you've seen the spacing on the stages come down, and you've seen the sand concentrations going up. So the first few wells that we drilled, I think we averaged about 900 pounds of sand per foot of lateral, and our most recent wells were more like 1,500 pounds per foot, which probably puts us somewhere in the middle, maybe on the upper end, because there are some places, and we've done a couple of wells now where we put almost 2,000 pounds per foot of pounds of sand per foot of lateral. Now, the question is, the bigger frac stages give you longer frac lengths, and therefore you maybe drain a bigger area and make more production or more reserves. But the next step now that I think we're going to have to figure out as an industry is how close together are these wells going to be spaced, and do the big frac jobs still make sense? In other words, if you're creating 1,000 foot frac length and you're drilling wells 600 feet apart, does that really make sense? So it's going to be a combination of what's the right size frac given the well spacing that you choose. And in my opinion, you can have wells drilled further apart and have bigger stimulations on them, or you can put them closer together and maybe do a different type of stimulation, but you probably can't have both. You probably can't keep putting them closer together and doing bigger frac jobs without getting the interference between wells. And that's the holy grail that we're all trying to figure out, is what the right combination of those two things is. And that's the next step for the frac designs, I think, is try to figure out how to keep more of the stimulation concentrated around the wellbore. But what we all do know is if you look at the wells, even the wells that we're making, as good as they are, with the kind of spacing that we're drilling on right now, we're recovering less than 10% of the oil in place. Our recovery factors probably vary from 6 to 8% of the oil in place if you look at what we're doing today. And so the question is, not really how many wells you can drill, it's what's the most efficient way to get a higher recovery factor from the reservoir. But I do think that going to 11 or 12 or low double digits is entirely possible. And it's a function of oil price, right? I mean, if you had a higher oil price, you can probably get higher recovery factors because you could afford to drill more wells on tighter spacing. And so I think the answer depends on what the price regime we're in is. But right now with the technology we see, and I know it'll get better with time, we're targeting the kind of to get from 6 or 8% recovery factors up to 11 or 12%, which we think is doable. And just that alone is a huge number. And there was a lot of times where maybe we were trying to run too fast, and so we weren't very efficient. And wells that I remember 2 years ago thinking, we're going to drill these wells for $7.5 million. Last year the cost crept up to where we were, writing AFEs for $8 million, and then we'd go drill a well and we'd spend $8.5 million. Well, now those $8.5 million wells we're drilling for $6 million. And if I look at, and some of them recently are going to be under $6 million. So when I look at that change from when we were at $8.5 million well to $6 million well, part of that is obviously just the service providers being willing to concede on prices, and so just the cost of services have come down. But a lot of it, and when I say a lot, 30, 40, 50% of it, is that we're just learning how to drill the wells faster and complete them more efficiently. It's new technology, but it's also simple things like, when we first started fracking these wells, we had a frac crew that we would go 24 hours a day, and we would complete 4 to 5 frac stages in a day. Well, that same crew today, they're doing 8 a day. So when you look at the time that we're saving on the completion and all the rental equipment and everything associated with it, a lot of those costs are just because we're just figuring out how to work better and smarter and faster.
To learn more about this topic and others, check out this month's print edition or the daily updates on this website.